I'm Natalie Prescott, 34 years old, and I was clutching a bundle of hand-sewn scarves and artisanal coffee sets as I walked up to my stepmother's snow-covered townhouse in Greenwich, Connecticut for the annual Christmas brunch. The gifts looked embarrassingly modest compared to the valet-parked Teslas and crystal wreaths on the mahogany door. What my stepfamily didn't know was that I could have bought this entire block without blinking. I've spent years keeping my success under wraps, more of a social experiment than a secret. I wanted to see who valued me, not my bank account. As I reached for the doorbell, that familiar twinge of childhood dread fluttered through me. Before I tell you what happened inside, drop your city in the comments, hit like, and stick around to hear how this gathering flipped upside down the moment they learned who I'd become. Growing up, it was just my dad, Peter, and me. After we lost Mom to a sudden aneurysm when I was 9, he poured himself into raising me with quiet strength. He ran a small landscaping business and taught me everything about hard work, loyalty, and keeping promises. He'd sit by my window each night, telling stories about the trips he and Mom used to dream of. We weren't rich, but we had a warmth money couldn't buy. That all changed when I turned 16, and he met Caroline at a holiday charity auction. Caroline was sleek, sharp, and ran a high-end interior design firm. Within months, she and her teenage twins, Savannah and Cole, moved in. Savannah was 17, always dressed head to toe in designer brands, and Cole, 15, was obsessed with status and appearance. From the start, the division was obvious. Caroline rolled her eyes at our cozy living room furniture and started making necessary upgrades. Dad, clearly enchanted and eager to please, started taking on double the workload to meet her standards. Suddenly, our Sunday pancakes became catered brunches. Fishing weekends became gallery openings. Savannah looked down on my thrifted clothes and would smirk whenever I mentioned school. "Oh, you go to a public magnet program? That's cute," she once said, sipping from a gold straw. Cole routinely borrowed my laptop and returned it loaded with junk software, claiming it was an accident. But worst of all were Caroline's little digs, masked as concern. "Don't you think Natalie should act more polished, Peter?" Savannah could give her some tips. Over time, those comments chipped away at my father's affection for me, and I watched in silence and as the man who once taught me to plant daffodils in winter slowly forgot how to look me in the eye. Dad began to see me through Caroline's lens, as someone unpolished, in need of refining. By the time I graduated high school, I felt like a guest in my own home. The final blow came the summer before college. While I was volunteering at an environmental camp in Vermont, Caroline had my bedroom converted into a sleek home gym. My belongings were packed up and moved into a cramped guest room without a word. "You should be grateful," she said, waving off my stunned silence when I returned. "This room has much better lighting for your skin tone. You'll thank me one day." On my 18th birthday, I moved out. Dad looked torn, but when Caroline called me overly sensitive and selfish, he didn't argue. That silence said everything. I'd been saving every dollar from tutoring, babysitting, and summer internships. Scholarships covered most of my tuition at the University of Washington, and I promised myself I would never again depend on anyone, not even Dad, for stability. In college, I fell in love with code. By junior year, I'd launched a prototype of Talent Nest, a digital hub that connected freelancers with local businesses. It started as a class assignment. By graduation, it had tens of thousands of users. At 25, Talent Nest went national. At 27, we cracked into the European market. By 29, I'd sold a strategic stake to a global firm, keeping controlling interest, and walked away with 9 figures. Today, at 34, I lead a tech empire valued at over $2.2 billion, with headquarters in New York, Berlin, Tokyo, and Toronto. We're set to open our Dubai office next quarter. And yet, no one in my family knows. I keep a modest apartment in Stamford, the same Connecticut town I grew up in. When I visit, I rent a basic SUV, wear off-the-rack clothes, and bring homemade gifts. I never post about my work or wealth online. Business features use an outdated photo from college. My team respects my wish to keep my name off the front page. Why the secrecy? At first, it was self-protection. Then it became a quiet test of character. If they couldn't accept me as a mid-level web designer, my go-to cover, then they had no right to the reality. Each Christmas, I brace for the eye rolls and offhand jabs about my cute little job. Every year, I say it'll be the last time I let them treat me this way. But I keep coming back. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's the little girl in me who still believes Dad might see through Caroline's cold veneer. This year feels different, though. 3 months ago, Dad had a mild heart attack. He's recovered, but it reminded me, life is too short to keep hiding. Something needs to change, and I'm ready. Maybe it was time to stop hiding, not to boast, but to reclaim my dignity. And maybe, just maybe, rebuild something real with my father before it was too late. The house looked like a postcard from a luxury holiday catalog. Twinkling white lights traced every window pane, wreaths with velvet bows hung from the doors, and through the oversized bay windows, I could see a glittering 12-foot tree in the foyer. Dad had once owned a warm, 3-bedroom colonial on a quiet street. After marrying Caroline, they upgraded to this 7-bedroom behemoth in Bellhaven, the most exclusive neighborhood in Greenwich. I pulled the rented Toyota Camry between Savannah's pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon and Cole's navy BMW M5 and felt that all-too-familiar knot tighten in my stomach. My real car, a custom Tesla Roadster, sat untouched in a private garage in Soho. I took a deep breath, grabbed the basket of carefully wrapped handmade gifts, and walked to the door. Caroline answered, a crystal champagne flute in hand. At 52, she was still effortlessly elegant. Her platinum blonde bob was perfectly styled, her outfit designer chic, her face the picture of subtle cosmetic precision. "Natalie, you made it," she said, lips tight, eyes scanning my thrifted sweater and jeans with barely masked disdain. "Everyone's already here. We were just about to start without you." "Traffic was rough," I replied softly, though I'd actually been parked down the block for 20 minutes, summoning courage. She stepped aside without offering to take my coat or help with the packages. The house smelled of cinnamon, pine, and the signature scent she'd once bragged was blended in Paris just for her. "Lovely decor," I said, noting the gleaming crystal ornaments, silk stockings, and custom garlands that clearly cost more than most families' entire holidays. "Oh, this," Caroline flicked her wrist. "Just something the decorator whipped up. We flew in from Aspen yesterday, so I didn't get to fine-tune everything." In the expansive great room, Savannah and Cole lounged across a cream Italian leather sectional, eyes glued to their phones. Savannah, now 35, was listed as senior partner at Caroline's firm, though her Instagram painted a more accurate picture: brand deals, travel, and 5-hour brunches. Cole, 33, had cycled through 3 finance jobs in 5 years. Industry whispers told me he wasn't pursuing new growth as much as being quietly pushed out. "Hey, sis," Cole mumbled, not glancing up. I was clearly an interruption. Savannah gave a fleeting look. "Adorable sweater. Target? They've got the cutest budget stuff." Before I could answer, I heard footsteps. Then Dad emerged from his study. For a moment, his eyes lit up. Then he saw Caroline watching, and just like that, the warmth disappeared. At 66, Dad looked older than his age, his once dark hair now completely silver, his posture slightly bent, and deep lines etched into his face from years of stress and compromise. The heart attack had clearly left its mark, but when he saw me, there was a flicker of something real in his smile, genuine, if distant. "Natalie," he said, crossing the room for a brief hug. "Good to see you, sweetheart." I smiled, though my chest tightened. This man had once been my entire world. Now, he felt like a familiar stranger, someone I loved deeply, but no longer truly knew. "Hi, Dad. You look good. How are you feeling?" "Oh, fit as a fiddle," he replied with forced cheer. But the way his hand drifted toward his chest said otherwise. "Doctors say I'm recovering better than expected." "Peter, darling," Caroline interjected smoothly, gliding over. "You know Dr. Hawthorne said to avoid stress. Natalie, your father needs peace and calm." The insinuation that I might endanger his health wasn't new. I bit my tongue, too used to Caroline's polished jabs to bother responding. "The gifts look lovely under the spruce. she added, gesturing to the massive 12-foot tree in the corner. Though, honestly, I told Peter, we've really gone too far this year. We're too generous for our own good. I knelt to place my humble, twine-wrapped packages among the tower of gifts beneath the tree, each box immaculately dressed in metallic paper and designer tags. My presents, like my gifts, felt stark in comparison. Dinner's almost ready, Caroline said brightly. Wagyu beef this year. Our trip to Tokyo last spring inspired us. The dining room was set like a fine dining spread, and throughout the extravagant meal, conversation stayed focused on luxuries. Savannah described her recent yacht cruise with friends you wouldn't know, while Cole bragged about his new limited edition timepiece. Only 50 made, he said proudly. During a rare lull, Caroline turned to me. So, Natalie, how's your little website business? Still building those, what do you call them? Online shop pages? It's digital strategy and full-service web development, I replied calmly. And, yes, it's going well. An understatement, considering I'd signed an 8-figure deal just yesterday. That's nice, dear, she said with a patronizing smile. It's wonderful when a hobby pays the bills. Dad remained quiet, eyes fixed on his plate. Once, he would have spoken up for me, offered a word of support. Now, silence had become his shield. Speaking of bills, Cole cut in, grinning, you should see the place I'm eyeing in Vail. $3 million. But my bonus should cover the down payment. You've got to come visit once I close. I forced a smile, the old ache settling in. They still had no idea who I really was. Not yet, but soon. If you can get time off work, of course, Cole added with a smirk. I thought of my penthouse in Manhattan, my beach house in Malibu, and the Tuscan villa I'd quietly purchased last year near Lucca. That sounds nice, I said simply. As dinner wore on, the weight of their assumptions pressed in. In their eyes, I was the relative they had to humor, the struggling web designer scraping by, the reminder of what not to become. A charity case wrapped in good intentions. I remembered last Christmas when Savannah sent me links to her friend's startup, chirping, they're hiring entry-level digital folks, just in case your contracts dry up. Or the year before, when Cole spent 40 minutes explaining Bitcoin to me, oblivious that I'd been one of the early institutional investors and quietly cashed out with millions. Each flashback sharpened my clarity. This charade had a cost. Not in wealth, I had more than enough, but in connection. They weren't relating to me, just the version they'd decided I was. And I'd let them. Maybe it was time to stop. By the time Caroline served her famous homemade Yule log, ordered, of course, from a Michelin-praised patisserie, I was already rehearsing how to tell the truth. Maybe in stages. Ease into it. But fate, as ever, has its own timing. After dinner, we gathered in the great room for the annual gift exchange, an event I dreaded every year. Not because I disliked giving, but because of the widening contrast between their opulent presents and my carefully crafted ones. I sat quietly on a low ottoman near the fireplace, trying to appear casual, as Caroline, ever the director, took center stage. Let's begin with the biggest ones, she beamed, pulling a massive wrapped box from beneath the tree. This is from Cole, to your father. Dad peeled back the gold foil wrapping, revealing a sleek golf simulator, top of the line, easily worth 20 grand. For your recovery, Cole said, beaming. Now you can swing indoors without the strain. Dad looked genuinely touched. Son, this is incredible. Nothing's too much for you, Dad, Cole replied, shooting a sideways glance my way. An unspoken dig. Savannah followed with a first edition Hemingway, something Dad had once mentioned wanting. Caroline presented a Patek Philippe, so elegant and rare, I was sure it cost more than their annual donations combined. Then came my turn. My pulse quickened as I passed out my modest packages. Brown paper, hand-tied ribbon, a stark contrast under the glittering tree. For Dad, I'd created a hand-bound memory book. I'd spent months gathering letters and photos from his old friends and relatives, stories of his youth, of our early years together, before Caroline. I'd even learned bookbinding from a small artisan in Brooklyn, crafting each page with care and intention. It was more than a gift. It was a tribute to the man I once knew. Caroline's gift was a hand-painted silk scarf, delicately detailed with the rolling hills and terracotta rooftops of Montepulciano, the small Italian town where her grandparents were born. It had taken weeks to complete. The brushwork painstakingly layered, the colors chosen to reflect the autumn light from old family photographs I'd quietly sourced over the years. For Savannah, I had crafted a custom silver bracelet, each charm representing a part of her life. A tiny ballet slipper for her childhood recitals, a little camera for her influencer years, and a miniature skyline of Florence, where she'd studied abroad. Cole's gift was a set of hand-drawn illustrations of his favorite vintage cars, an Aston Martin DB5, a Jaguar E-Type, and a '67 Mustang, rendered in a sleek architectural style and framed in walnut, which I carved and sanded myself. Dad opened his gift first. As he turned the pages of the handmade book, I saw it, the soft light of memory in his eyes. For a moment, I saw my father again. "Natalie," he murmured. "This must have taken forever. I don't know what to say." Before he could continue, Caroline interjected, her voice brisk. "My turn." She tugged the silk scarf from its box, holding it out like a piece of evidence. "Oh, colorful." She examined it at arm's length. "Is this Tuscany? We were just there in September. The cypress trees are much more elegant than this." My heart dipped, but I kept my face still. "It's Montepulciano, where your grandparents lived. I based it on historical photos." "How creative," she replied, already setting it down. "You always did have unusual pastimes." Next was Savannah. She opened the bracelet box, her eyes lighting for a second before fading into confusion. "Silver?" she said flatly. "I'm really more into gold these days. And these charms are so specific." She held it by the chain, letting it dangle like a broken necklace. "Are these ballet shoes? I haven't danced in like 15 years. "I thought it would be meaningful," I said quietly. "A way to honor your journey." "Well," she said, dropping it back into the box, "it's certainly unique. Thanks for the thought." Cole flipped through the illustrations with casual disinterest. "Cars. Cool," he muttered, setting them aside. "Very artistic." Silence settled like frost. Then Caroline clapped her hands. "Well, our turn to spoil Natalie." From her and Dad, a designer scarf still creased, clearly regifted. Savannah gave me a bath set, clearance tag half ripped. Cole handed over a restaurant gift card. "Treat yourself to something nice," he said with a smirk. I smiled politely. Inside, I was done pretending. It was obvious none of them had spent more than 15 minutes choosing their gifts for me. The message was clear. "You're not worth our time." "Not really." I thanked them with practiced grace, biting back emotion. Savannah reached again for the silver bracelet I'd made, turning it in her fingers with theatrical curiosity. "I suppose when you're on a budget, making things yourself is economical," she said sweetly. "Did you follow a YouTube tutorial?" I exhaled slowly. "Actually, I studied with a silversmith. Each charm was individually cast in—" "It's fine, Natalie," she cut in, waving a manicured hand. "We don't need the DIY channel explanation. Not everyone can afford Tiffany's." She set the bracelet back in its box and nudged it slightly away from her other gifts, like it might tarnish her designer collection. I glanced toward my father, still silent, his eyes fixed on the fire as if he could pretend none of this was happening. "Can't even afford a proper gift," Savannah muttered under her breath, just loud enough. She sipped her champagne and smirked. The walls of the room seemed to contract, pressing inward. Every moment like this from the last decade flooded my mind. Snide remarks, dismissive gestures, backhanded compliments. I'd swallowed it all for years. And for what? To prove that I could rise above it? To cling to the illusion that I still had a place here? Maybe I was trying to prove something to myself. That their love, or at least their respect, wasn't conditional. That I could earn it just by being me. Then my phone buzzed. I shifted slightly, pulling it from my pocket. A series of messages lit up the screen in rapid succession. It was nearing midnight in Dubai. The exact deadline for the acquisition deal my team had been working on for 6 months. Our main competitor had swooped in with a last-minute counteroffer. We had less than 2 hours to respond. I angled the screen away from Caroline's hawk-like gaze and read the urgent texts. Then, of course, "Natalie, really?" Caroline said, her voice thick with exaggerated exasperation. "Can you please put the phone away for one night? What could possibly be that important in your little website business on Christmas Eve?" I stared at her, thumb hovering over the screen. Years of brushing off these comments, of slipping out quietly to handle multi-million-dollar deals, pretending it was nothing. But tonight, something cracked. Maybe it was all the years of pretending. Maybe it was knowing Dad's time was limited. I looked up, voice steady. "Actually," I said slowly, "I do need to take this." Savannah scoffed, reaching for a chocolate truffle. "More important than family?" I stood. "For once," I said, "it absolutely is." This time, I didn't leave the room like I usually did. I stayed seated on the ottoman by the fire, lifted my phone, and opened the secure messaging app where my executive team was already waiting. The conversation filled the screen. "Natalie, Meridian just offered $75 million over our bid for the Dubai acquisition. We need to respond within 3 hours. Legal and finance are standing by. Your jet is fueled and ready if you need to fly out tonight." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Cole shifting. Nosy as ever, he leaned in slightly, catching the dollar figures on my screen. His eyes widened. "Wait! What kind of web design involves millions of dollars?" he asked, his voice cracking mid-sentence. I inhaled deeply. This moment had been building for years. "I don't just design websites, Cole," I said. "I own Talent Nest." The room stilled. Talent Nest, featured in Fortune, Forbes, and Bloomberg, a household name in the startup and tech world. Our most recent valuation put us among the top private tech firms in North America. "The Talent Nest?" Savannah asked, blinking. "The platform that connects companies with freelance talent?" "That's the one," I replied calmly, tapping a quick reply to my team. "I launched it my junior year at University of Washington. We have offices in New York, Berlin, Singapore, Toronto, and Dubai opens next week." Caroline let out a strained laugh. "Natalie, don't be silly. That company is worth billions. The CEO is some tech prodigy." She froze mid-sentence as I slowly turned my phone screen to face them. The chat thread clearly addressed me as Ms. Prescott, CEO, with lines discussing capital terms, intellectual property holdings, and equity provisions that dwarfed the value of everything inside this house. "That prodigy," I said softly, "would be me." Silence. Just the fireplace crackling and the low hum of the air vents. I stood, walking toward the center of the room as a video call came through. My executive team filled the screen in a grid of composed, focused faces. "Good evening, everyone," I said. "I've reviewed the counteroffer. Have legal draft a response with the following terms." And I launched into a fluid negotiation strategy involving stock swaps, long-term valuation protections, and exclusive partnership rights, adjusting language to preserve our brand control and client loyalty. I ended the call with a quick, "Thank you. Let's finalize," within the hour. When I looked up, all 4 of them were frozen. Peter, Caroline, Savannah, and Cole, expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to dawning realization. Then the doorbell rang. Caroline, visibly flustered, hurried to answer it. She returned moments later, pale, and behind her stood a distinguished man in a black chauffeur's uniform, hat tucked under one arm. "Ms. Prescott," he said with a bow, "your car is ready?" "Excuse me," the chauffeur said with a courteous bow. "Ms. Prescott, your jet is ready for the Dubai meeting. The car is waiting whenever you're prepared to depart. Your executive team has packed your essentials, and all briefing documents are preloaded for review during the flight." The silence in the room was total. Not even Savannah, normally the quickest to respond with a sarcastic quip, had anything to say. I thanked the chauffeur softly and asked him to wait outside for 10 minutes. As the door closed behind him, I turned back toward my family. Their faces looked like a paused film, eyes wide, expressions stiff with disbelief. You have a private jet?" Cole finally asked, his voice cracking. Yes, I replied calmly. Along with homes in Manhattan, Malibu, and Tuscany, my company is valued just over $2 billion. We employ more than 5,000 people across 5 countries. Caroline's mouth opened and closed once. But you always said? I never lied, I said, my voice even. I do work in digital strategy. I do design websites. I just happen to own the company that does it, rather than working for someone else. Everything else, they had assumed. Still Peter, my father, hadn't said a word. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. There was shock, yes, but there was also something more. Something like pride, tinged with deep regret. Why didn't you tell us? He asked quietly. I met his eyes. Would it have changed how I was treated? The question hung there. No one answered, because we all knew the truth. If they had known, everything would have shifted. I would have become the one they listened to, catered to, maybe even respected. All this time, Savannah said slowly, when we thought you were struggling, you thought wrong, I finished. I've been more successful than any of you. But why the Toyota? Why live in that tiny apartment when you visit? Why wear... Caroline gestured to my thrifted sweater, unable to process it. Because I wanted to know if I mattered, I said simply. If who I am mattered. Without the money. Without the flash. Without the power. A long, uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My phone buzzed again. A final message from legal, awaiting my green light on the terms. As I turned to answer, my eyes fell on the table beside the tree. The bracelet Savannah had dismissed. The car sketches Cole hadn't even looked at. Caroline's scarf tossed aside. Each one had cost me time, thought, and care. Not dollars, but something real. Yet to them, it had meant nothing, because it hadn't come in a branded box. The irony struck me hard, and then passed, because I was done proving anything to them. If you've ever felt underestimated or overlooked, hit subscribe, because what happens next in Natalie's story will remind you just how powerful quiet strength can be. The gifts they had so casually dismissed had cost me more, in time, thought, and care, than anything they could have pulled off a shelf at Neiman Marcus or ordered from some high-end boutique. I need to go, I said, slipping on my coat and gathering my purse. There's a company to run and a deal to close. I moved toward the foyer, the weight of silence behind me thicker than ever. It wasn't just awkwardness, it was recognition. The sound of walls crumbling. I had nearly reached the front door when I heard hurried footsteps. I turned to see all 4 of them trailing behind, expressions transformed. Caroline's signature poise had cracked into something that looked like panic. Savannah and Cole stood with uncertain smiles, like kids caught red-handed. But it was Peter's face that struck me the most. A layered tangle of shame, pride, and years too late. Natalie, wait, Caroline called, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. There's no need to rush off. Family is more important than business. Surely your team can manage things for one night. I tilted my head. Interesting. A few minutes ago, you were annoyed that my little website business was disturbing family time. Savannah stepped forward, now wearing the bracelet she'd earlier dismissed. She turned her wrist like she was modeling it. I was only teasing about the gift, sis. It's really unique. Very avant-garde. Cole held up the framed sketches. The craftsmanship is legit. I was thinking these would look great in my office. I'll tell clients they were made by my incredibly talented sister. The whiplash in their behavior would have been funny if it hadn't been so painfully transparent. Cruelty had morphed into admiration with one revelation: who I really was and what I owned. Caroline's eyes brimmed with false warmth. It must have been so hard, building such an empire all on your own. If only we'd known, we could have helped. Peter has so many connections. I let out a dry laugh. You mean the connections you told him weren't worth using on my little project after college? Caroline flushed. That was a misunderstanding. I only meant... I know exactly what you meant. My voice was calm, steadier than I'd expected. You never believed in me. None of you did. That's not true, Cole said, though his voice cracked under the weight of it. Isn't it? I asked. Last Christmas, Savannah sent me a job link for an entry-level assistant role. The year before, you tried to explain Bitcoin to me while I was managing a crypto portfolio worth 8 figures. No one responded, and that silence said more than any apology ever could. You spent 20 minutes telling me my business model would never scale, I said, my voice calm but cutting. To the person who literally built it. Cole shifted uncomfortably. And the year before that, you told me to apply for an entry-level admin job at your friend's firm because, and I quote, "At your age, you need to start thinking about stability." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "I was just trying to help." "No," I replied evenly. "You were trying to feel superior. All of you were." I looked from Cole to Savannah to Caroline. Every Christmas, every gathering, same dynamic. You all playing the part of the successful, generous family, patiently enduring the underachiever. Savannah's jaw tightened. "Well, you did hide everything. You can't blame us for not knowing. That's on you, Natalie, not us." "You're right," I nodded. "I did hide it." They all blinked. At first, it was for self-protection. After years of being dismissed, of hearing that I wasn't enough, I needed space to build something without your voices in my head. But then, it became something else. "What?" Peter asked, speaking for the first time in minutes. "What did it become?" I turned to him slowly. The ache in my chest returned, not from anger, but from all the years of disappointment. "A test." He looked confused. "A test?" To see if who I am mattered more than what I had. My voice cracked slightly. To see if anyone in this family would ever see me. Not for what I could buy or give, but for me. Silence fell again. "Dad?" I said more gently. "Did you know?" He hesitated. "Not everything. Not the full extent. But yes, I knew you were doing well. A client mentioned seeing you speak at a tech conference a few years ago." My heart sank. "You knew?" He nodded slowly. "I looked up your company afterward. I realized you were doing something big, but you never brought it up. I thought you had your reasons for staying quiet." I stared at him, stunned. "You let them treat me like that? For years?" "I was trying to respect your privacy." "Respect?" I echoed, incredulous. "You sat silently while they mocked me, treated me like I was an afterthought. Is that what you call respect?" His eyes filled with tears. "I was wrong," he whispered. "So wrong. About so many things." He looked down. "After your mom died, I was lost. Caroline, she was strong, confident, everything I wasn't, and I leaned on her too much." He finally met my gaze again. "And in doing that, I let go of you. I let her make decisions I should have made," Peter said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I let her set the tone for our family because it was easier than standing up for what I knew was right." "That's not fair, Peter," Caroline snapped, her composure cracking. "I've only ever wanted what's best for this family." "No," I said, voice firm. "You've wanted what's best for your image." I looked her square in the eye. "This family has always been your status project. You saw Dad and me as fixer-uppers, something with potential if properly renovated, but embarrassing in our original state." Caroline's spine straightened in indignation. "That's a terrible thing to say, after all I've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Name one thing done out of care for me, not how it reflected on you." She said nothing, and that silence was louder than anything she could have offered. "I didn't come here tonight intending to say any of this," I continued. "I've played the quiet disappointment role for so long, it became familiar." I took a breath. "But when I watched you all sneer at the gifts I made, gifts that took hours of my life, just because they didn't come wrapped in luxury, something inside me broke." I turned back to my father. "The saddest part is none of you really know me. You don't know that I fund scholarships for girls in STEM, that I've built schools in underserved countries, that I mentor young entrepreneurs, that I helped draft legislation to protect gig workers' rights." I met each of their eyes. "The only metric of success you've ever valued is one with a dollar sign." My phone buzzed again. The Dubai team was waiting on my final approval. "I need to take this," I said, "and then I need to leave. You're really flying to Dubai? Tonight? Savannah asked, like the concept was incomprehensible. Some of us have built something worth flying halfway around the world for, I replied. And unlike this family, my team actually needs me. I turned toward the door, but then, softly, I felt a hand on my arm. Natalie, please, my father said. I know I failed you, in so many ways, but you're still my daughter. And I love you. He hesitated. Is there any way we can start over? To make this right? I looked at him, really looked. Past the regret and shame, I caught a glimpse of the man who once told bedtime stories and planted daffodils with me in spring. I don't know, Dad, I said honestly. But if we ever do, it has to be real. No more roles, no more performances, no more measuring love in status. He nodded, tears streaming silently. I'd like that more than anything. The chauffeur reappeared at the doorway, his voice calm but firm. Ms. Prescott, we'll need to depart shortly to meet your flight window. The runway team has confirmed a limited clearance. The Dubai meeting couldn't wait. Millions of dollars and thousands of jobs were riding on this deal. But this decision wasn't just about a flight. It was about a future. My future. And whether or not these people, who shared my blood but had felt like strangers for years, would have a place in it. The chauffeur waited by the door. My executive team remained on hold, and my family watched me, expressions suspended between shock, regret, and sudden interest. In that moment, the weight of all my identities converged. The quiet girl in hand-me-downs, the underestimated daughter, the powerhouse CEO, and the woman no longer willing to play a part in someone else's script. Give me a moment, I told the chauffeur. I stepped into the next room, connected with my executive team, and swiftly approved our counteroffer. I authorized the funding to secure the deal and confirmed my arrival in Dubai within 18 hours. When I returned, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Caroline now wore the hand-painted scarf she had previously mocked, draped elegantly around her shoulders like it had always belonged there. Savannah twirled the silver bracelet on her wrist, admiring it like it sparkled with diamonds. Cole was carefully leafing through the car illustrations as if they were museum pieces. Your jet must be amazing, Savannah offered, suddenly warm. I've only flown private a few times, with friends. Do you already have a place in Dubai? Cole asked. I've been exploring real estate opportunities there. I'm sure Natalie has the most stunning accommodations, Caroline chimed in, voice sugary. Perhaps we could all visit sometime. I've always wanted to see Dubai. Their desperation to latch onto my success was almost comical if it hadn't been so transparent. It wasn't me they cared about. It was the empire I had built, the places I could take them, the benefits I could provide. Only my father remained still, quiet, his gaze filled with something close to understanding. I need to go, I said, stepping toward the foyer. But before I leave, I want to make something clear. The room quieted. Tonight showed me exactly where we stand as a family, or more honestly, where we don't. Caroline blinked. What do you mean? We're all so proud of what you've accomplished. Aren't we, everyone? A chorus of empty agreement followed. I held up a hand. For years, I began, voice steady. I showed up hoping things would change. I've come to these gatherings year after year, I began, hoping for something real, for connection, for respect, not for what I own or earn, but for who I am. I scanned their faces, and every time I left disappointed, but still hopeful. I took a deep breath. Tonight made things crystal clear, the truth I've been avoiding for too long. What matters to this family isn't character or compassion or creativity. It's status. It's wealth. That's not fair, Savannah said weakly. Isn't it? I asked. The gifts I spent weeks crafting were disappointing until you found out I'm worth billions. My work was a little web thing until you realized it's what built an international empire. I was the family disappointment until suddenly I became the family ATM. No one argued because they couldn't. Their about face had exposed everything. I'm flying to Dubai because people are counting on me. Employees, clients, partners. That's real success to me. Building something that matters. I turned to Peter. Dad, you once taught me that. Before Caroline. Before all this. I gestured to the mansion, its designer decor glowing under expensive lighting. You told me a person's worth isn't in what they own. It's in how they live. His eyes filled again. I remember, he whispered. What happened to that man? Where did he go? He didn't have an answer, but the look on his face told me he was wondering the same thing. Then, before I could stop myself, the words came out. I'm leaving in 5 minutes, I said, but I'm extending an invitation. All 4 of them instantly straightened. I didn't miss the flickers of intent behind their eyes, Savannah's sudden excitement, Cole's calculation, Caroline's quiet smirk of victory, and Peter's cautious, emotional hope. Dad, I said, meeting his eyes, you can come with me. Not to Dubai. I'll be working the whole time, but after, I'm taking 2 weeks at my villa in Tuscany. You're welcome to join me there? Just Dad? Caroline asked quickly, masking her sharpness with feigned curiosity. Just Dad, I said firmly. This isn't a family vacation. It's a chance for him and me to rebuild something honest. No games, no performances. Peter looked stunned. You'd want that? After everything? I don't know what I want yet, I admitted, but I know life is short. Your heart attack reminded me of that. And before I close the door completely, I want to give this one last shot, on new terms. Then I turned to Caroline, Savannah, and Cole, which means, for the first time in years, I'm choosing me. As for the rest of you, I said, turning to Caroline, Savannah, and Cole, I'm setting boundaries. No more condescension, no more measuring my worth by headlines or bank balances. I looked each of them in the eye. If you want a relationship with me moving forward, it has to be built on mutual respect and genuine care, not on what I can buy for you or the doors I can open. Of course we respect you, Natalie, Caroline said quickly, smoothing her scarf. We're family. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Family respects each other's dignity. Family celebrates success instead of feeling threatened by it. Family values effort and intention, not just designer labels. I checked my watch. I have to go. I turned to my father. Dad, the offer still stands. Think about it. If you want to come to Tuscany, let me know. I'll handle everything. He nodded, eyes still brimming with the weight of everything unsaid. I gathered my coat and purse and gave a silent nod to the chauffeur. As I reached the front door, I paused and turned back. Merry Christmas. The expressions on their faces were a collage of conflicting truths. Shock, regret, calculation, and on Peter's face, the faint flicker of courage as the Maybach pulled away from the estate. I felt lighter than I had in years. The performance was over. The mask dropped. And whatever happened next, whether my father chose to repair what we'd lost, whether the others ever reflected on their behavior, it would all be based in truth, not illusion. At the private airstrip, my Gulfstream gleamed under the hangar lights. I stepped aboard, greeted by the quiet professionalism of the crew. The jet felt like freedom itself. As I settled into my seat, I let go of every version of me I'd ever tried to shrink, just to be accepted. No more compartments, no more hiding. My phone buzzed. I expected a message from my executive team, more updates on the Dubai acquisition. But it wasn't. It was from Dad. I'll be there. Not for Tuscany, or for what you have, but for the chance to know my daughter again. To be the father I once was, and should have remained. If you'll let me, I won't waste it. As the jet soared upward, slicing into the early dawn, I looked out the window. The sky was breaking open into gold and rose, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something new when I thought about my family. Not longing, not resentment, but hope, the kind grounded in honesty and earned second chances. Dubai awaited, and beyond it, perhaps, a new beginning. 10 hours into the 13-hour flight, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my seat, allowing myself a rare moment of reflection. The confrontation in Greenwich already felt strangely distant, like it had happened in another lifetime, yet also just moments ago. The expressions on their faces when they realized who I really was, Those stunned, scrambling reactions would stay with me, not as a triumph, but as confirmation. Confirmation of what I'd long suspected. Their approval had always been conditional. Conditional on status, on utility, on wealth. Only Peter, my father, had chosen to accept my invitation. Caroline had attempted to insert herself into the plan, insisting she should accompany him for his well-being. But he had declined, firmly. It was the first time in years I'd seen him push back. A small step, but a meaningful one. He would meet me in Tuscany the following week, after my Dubai meetings wrapped. Just the two of us, at my villa, nestled among the vineyards, quietly trying to stitch together what had been torn for years. The Dubai deal closed without a hitch. My team had executed the strategy flawlessly, and my in-person presence sealed the final negotiations. As I stood in the glass-walled boardroom, pen in hand, city lights sprawling beyond the skyline, I felt something unexpected: detachment. The money, the prestige, it was never the reason I built Talent Nest. My motivation had always been impact, creating opportunities, solving complex problems, building something that outlasted ego. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing my stepfamily now revered had never been about what they celebrated. It was about purpose, something they'd never understood. After launching the Dubai office, I flew straight to Florence, then drove to my villa in the hills of Chianti. Peter arrived the next morning, visibly nervous but resolute as he stepped out of the car. The villa, an 18th century stone farmhouse, had been restored with care. Quiet, unpretentious luxury. Earth tones, sunlight, olive trees, a place to breathe. "This is beautiful, Natalie," he said softly as I showed him his guest room. "It's peaceful," I replied. "That's why I bought it. After the pressure of New York, I needed something grounded, real." The first few days were awkward. We danced around years of pain, took slow walks through the vines, cooked side by side in the sun-drenched kitchen. And eventually, we began to talk. Really talk. "I was so proud when I learned what you'd built," he admitted one evening as we sat on the terrace, a bottle of Brunello between us. "But ashamed, too, that I heard about it from someone else. Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at him. "Why do you think?" He exhaled, then nodded slowly. "At first, I thought it was business. But then I realized you were testing us. Testing me. And I knew," Peter said quietly, "if I acknowledged what you'd accomplished, I'd also have to acknowledge how badly I'd failed you." I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "You were once my hero, Dad. You taught me that character matters more than possessions, that integrity isn't for sale, that standing up for what's right is more important than going along to keep the peace." He wiped his eyes, the lines on his face etched deeper with regret. "I lost my way after your mother died. The grief, it swallowed me. And Caroline, she seemed so strong, so certain. It was easier to let her take over than fight for what I knew in my heart was right. By the time I realized what was happening," he added, "the roles were already set. I stopped leading. I became a passenger in my own life. And in our relationship," I finished gently. He nodded. "The heart attack woke me up. Facing mortality, it strips away everything unimportant." Over the next week in Tuscany, we talked. Some conversations tender, others raw and painful. I showed him photos of Talent Nest offices around the world, told him stories about our mentorship programs and education initiatives. He shared memories of my mother, some I'd never heard, others long forgotten. Slowly, the man I once admired began to reemerge. One morning, sipping espresso on the sun-drenched terrace, he sighed. "Caroline's been calling every day, wants to know when we're coming back. Keeps talking about family unity and second chances." "What do you want?" I asked. He paused, really considering it. "I want to be your father again. The father I should have been. I want to reclaim my voice and start making decisions that reflect who I truly am." Meanwhile, texts trickled in from Savannah and Cole. Savannah now wanted to learn about the tech world, asking if I'd mentor her. Cole had a promising startup he wanted me to invest in, and hinted at a friend looking for funding. Neither mentioned the past. Neither apologized. I responded with clarity and kindness that any relationship moving forward would need to begin with honest reflection, not financial opportunity. Savannah quickly turned defensive, insisting she had always supported my journey. Cole, realizing I wasn't opening my checkbook, simply stopped responding. When it came time to return home, Dad and I stood quietly at the edge of the vineyard. We weren't fully healed. Healing would take time and effort, but we had something we hadn't had in years: honesty, and a fragile, but very real, willingness to try again. Not as a performance, not out of guilt, but out of love, on new terms. "What will you do when you get back?" I asked my father, as we shared our final dinner on the terrace in Tuscany, the late summer breeze carrying hints of rosemary and ripe grapes. He set his wine glass down, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. "Have some difficult conversations," he said with quiet conviction. "Set boundaries I should have drawn decades ago." I nodded, proud of his resolve but grounded in the reality he was about to face. "It won't be easy," I said. "Patterns like that, they don't unravel overnight." "I know," he replied, "but living without integrity isn't easy either. It's a different kind of hard, the kind that wears you down slowly until you don't recognize yourself anymore." When we parted at the Florence airport, our hug was longer, warmer, more real than any we'd shared in a decade. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me." "I almost did," I admitted, "more than once." "I'm glad you didn't." In the months that followed, my father began the slow, deliberate process of reclaiming his life. He and Caroline entered counseling, but from what he shared, it was clear she wasn't open to real reflection or change. My step-siblings, Savannah and Cole, drifted away completely once they realized I wouldn't be funding their ambitions or offering access to my network. By the next Christmas, everything had changed. Dad had moved into a small but bright apartment near Central Park, choosing separation after Caroline refused to acknowledge the impact of her control. He began volunteering at a local youth center, teaching woodworking to underprivileged teens, rediscovering a part of himself that valued creation, mentorship, and quiet purpose. Instead of another artificial gathering at the Greenwich estate, we spent Christmas together in New York. I gave him a tour of my Talent Nest headquarters, introduced him to my team, and then we spent the weekend cooking in my penthouse kitchen, talking, not about the past, but about now. That season, I made another decision. No more hiding my success. I had spent years using modesty as armor, shielding myself from judgment, from exploitation. But there was freedom in authenticity. I didn't need to lead with wealth. I just didn't need to hide it anymore. The revelation hadn't brought me the acceptance I once longed for, but it had brought clarity. My father and I were rebuilding, slowly, with care. The others had revealed exactly who they were when they thought I had nothing to offer. The greatest gift I received wasn't financial. It was personal. True wealth wasn't found in valuations or real estate. It was in boundaries, in truth, in the courage to be fully seen, and the strength to walk away from anyone who refused to see me at all. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you, truly. Sharing this wasn't easy, but I believe stories like mine matter, not because they end in boardrooms or villas, but because they begin in silence, in pain, in being overlooked by the very people who were supposed to see us. If you've ever felt dismissed, underestimated, or pressured to shrink yourself to keep the peace, I see you, and I want to hear from you. Please leave a comment. Tell me what part of my journey resonated with you. What did it remind you of in your own life? Whether it's your career, your family, or simply the choice to live more truthfully, I want this space to be a place where we lift each other up. And if you believe in building a community that celebrates authenticity over appearance, character over currency, then please subscribe to the channel. Your support doesn't just help share my story, it helps validate thousands of others like it. Here's what I've learned. Wealth is meaningless if it costs you your peace. Success is hollow if you lose yourself in the performance. You don't need to justify your worth by how much you earn, what you wear, or who validates you. You are enough, as you are. But you must protect that truth with boundaries. You must be willing to walk away from anyone who can only love the version of you that benefits them. So here's my advice. Stop waiting for the people who hurt you to finally see your light. Instead, be the one who refuses to dim it. Choose honesty. Choose peace. Choose yourself, even if it means starting over. And if you've done that already, welcome. You're not alone anymore.